Are you playing to win or just running out the clock? In sports, the game clock drives every decision. It creates urgency, sharpens focus, and pushes players to perform their best. So, what if you treated your life with that same sense of urgency? I've created an exercise to help you do just that. It's called Your Game Clock. Download Your Game Clock today at bill-burke.net/clock. It's free, it's simple yet transformative, and it could be the first step towards achieving peak performance in the areas of your life that matter the most. Remember, life is not a practice run. Every second counts, and your time is now. Welcome to another episode of the Fortitude Forum, and I am so excited and thrilled, in fact, to have my next guest here today. He is the CEO of MassMutual Great Lakes. He's the founder of the Podium Group, and he's also the host of the At the Podium podcast. He is Manny Amezcua. Manny, welcome to the show.
Bill, awesome to be with you today, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad we can make this happen finally. And I wanted to start the conversation with this. And I know there's so many different directions that we can go, but I wanted to start with this. There's so many people that know you. And as I do, when I first was able to spend some time around you, I noticed that you use the word obsessed quite frequently. And I wanted to talk about the origin of that word in your life. And you've described yourself as being obsessed with adding value and solving problems in every room that you enter. So, where does that desire, that obsession come from? And how has it shaped the way that you lead and the way that you live?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for noticing that and for leading with that question. This obsession I have, I would just describe it as it's very difficult for me not to think about being intentional in conversations with people that I care about, that I trust, that I respect, that I want to serve as a fountain, not a drain to. It's very difficult for me not to enter into a room to people I'm excited to see and visit with and not have the desire to say, man, what is something simple I could do to add value or solve a problem in the space that I'm going to be in right now? Benny Fowler, who I know is a guy that you know really well, another fellow Spartan of yours from the D'Antonio years. He always talks about this 5 minute favor. And I loved it when Benny said that to me, gosh, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. He said, if you could find a way to do a 5 minute favor for somebody that you're with, that you value, you care about, you respect, like, why would you not seize that moment? And so this like way that I describe it, this obsession that I have, it's something that goes all the way back to my childhood where I would consistently see my mother and my father model behaviors where even though we had limited financial resources, they found unique, loving, respectful ways to add value, to make people feel seen and appreciated, to solve problems when people had simple problems that could be solved. And I think that obsession that I've developed over the years and from my adolescence into my adulthood really stems from seeing that consistent modeling and behavior in my parents, then my siblings, and today is my wife, Samantha. She's an excellent modeler of those behaviors. And so I've just been blessed to be surrounded by people who help to organically reinforce really great habits like that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I can tell, and anybody that's been around you can tell that you don't just talk about it, you actually live it. And it's evident in just being in the same room with you. So I appreciate that answer. And I love that about you because not a lot of people use that word, and not a lot of people take that approach into the work that they do and the life that they're living. So thank you for that. And it's just truly special to see somebody that's embodying that quality. Now, I want to shift a little bit and ask you about the fact that you have built companies, you built cultures, you built communities as well. So I'm curious, what has been the key difference, or what do you think the key difference is between just building a business and creating a space or a company that people truly feel like they belong at?
Wow. You weren't kidding when you said that you had thoughtfully curated questions. That's another good question. One, I think about some of the most significant things that have happened in the history of this incredible country, right? And some of the common characteristics of those moments are one person had a really clear vision and they were really brave and courageous about sharing this almost like unimaginable possibility. Two, they were excellent communicators of it, and therefore they were very influential at attracting others to the vision and the beliefs that they had. Three, they were obsessed. They were obsessed about what they said the vision of possibility was for them, and they were consistent and disciplined. The habits were never questioned. That person, through behavior even more than words, clearly represented what they said was possible. And so you think of like spectrums of like impossible to possible to probable, right? Like how do you work through those from one end to the other? And I just have always found that some of those are the most common things that you find in those moments. So I think when building or scaling any type of organization, any type of crusade, if you will, that you might think that you're on, I think clarity in the vision, being very passionate and purposeful in communicating it to others to influence people to that cause. And then I think that obsession demonstrated through consistent habits and disciplines are all some of the most common things that you'd find in those moments. So one of the vision that one of our organizations has is that, hey, we want to be the premier brand in the space of architecting plans that deliver financial security, stability, and success for individuals, families, and business owners. That's the vision. We communicate that all the time. And some of the ways that we frame that up to get people to buy into it is to remind people that, hey, today, our society has one of the worst savings rates in American history. Today, 80% of individuals 50 years or older are afraid to retire because they're afraid to run out of money in retirement. Today, 50% of parents are saying, I need life insurance or I need more life insurance to make sure that my family is protected. God forbid I were to pass away and unable to provide an income for them. So when you share that, boy, you can get people really inspired to say, man, I want to do something about that. I want to be an agent of change. I want to help my neighbors. I want to help my community. I want to help my church, my school. I want to help the people in my neighborhood live a more enjoyable quality of life by having confidence that they're financially secure, stable, and successful. And so I think when we communicate that and we come in every single day prepared to do that hard work, I think we can get people really excited to be a part of the crusade that we're on within our organization. So I think those are some of the things that I would share.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went into a little bit of depth there, especially with the part about buying in, because it's easy to say, hey, we have a vision, but to get people emotionally bought in, I think is so crucial. And that really is where the magic starts to happen, not just emotionally invested in their own dreams and hopes, but also in how they can impact others as well. So I think that's a powerful message that everybody can really dial into and lock into and take a lot away from. I wanted to ask you as well, in that pursuit of building that type of company or really building anything in this whole idea of the relentless pursuit of excellence in your own life personally, what does that look like and how do you hold yourself to that standard and balance, let's say, the two dynamics of avoiding burnout but also not crossing over into perfectionism either?
One, you and I have talked about this a lot, right? We've talked about the idea of auditing our circles. And there's so many different like catchphrases that we've heard throughout our 40 something years on earth. We're the same age. But one of the things that I am consistently reminded of is that birds of a feather flock together, right? And so this notion that we should always audit our circles is to ensure that we're putting ourselves in the best environment to be successful around the things that we are saying are most important to us. And it's okay to acknowledge that not everything is important to us. So, like in my personal scenario, I desire to be a really competent and successful financial steward on behalf of many that I can serve and impact throughout time, right? Whether that's through our firm, through our small practice, through the 100 families that we serve in professional sports and own their own business. I desire that, right? And so, is my environment, am I auditing my circle in a way that the people I'm surrounding myself with share a similar vision, value system, and desire to have that sort of impact? I think so. So I think the first point I'm trying to make is to make sure that we're auditing our environment, auditing our circle to ensure that the things we say are most important to us are the things that are just going to organically occur because environmentally we are set up for success. So let me use in sort of an opposite sort of visual. You are really in shape, Billy, right? We were just talking about that. You take incredible care of your physical fitness and health. Okay, you are likely not eating cheeseburgers delivered by DoorDash at 11:30 p.m. at night. You're likely not eating a double whopper. You're likely not getting Dairy Queen delivered at midnight. You're likely getting good sleep, drinking a lot of water, going to the gym. You're likely encouraging your family to do the same, or your family's encouraging you. You're likely doing those things. And so, therefore, when people see you, they're like, oh, knowing Billy's environment, like, it's not a surprise because his wife is super healthy. His two children are super healthy. This is not a shocker. And so I think for the most part, I think first we've got to make sure that we're controlling our environment and we're setting ourselves up for success so that environmentally we already have a competitive advantage to win. But then you mentioned burnout. Number two, I would say, and I think you've met my good friend Israel Adonijay, had a great career with the Chicago Bears. He's now one of the most successful entrepreneurs that I personally know on the planet. And I don't know everybody, but he is one of the most incredible success stories that I know. Izzy always talks about taking time to celebrate the micro wins because one of the things that happens with really high performing, driven, obsessed individuals is that we can forget that every once in a while, man, you got to stop that treadmill and put it on a cool down for a moment. And then after the cool down, you actually got to get off, maybe take some water, maybe stretch, maybe do a couple different things before you decide to get back on that treadmill full tilt. And so Israel, I think, has always done a good job of communicating the value of hitting kind of time out on the rat race and taking a moment to celebrate the micro win. I think conversely, you and I have also discussed this before. There's lessons in wins and losses. Sometimes the lessons in losing are 10 times more valuable than the lessons we can take away from when we're on a win streak. So I think as well to avoid burnout, because sometimes the burnout really begins to creep in when all of a sudden we're experiencing unexpected losses. I think that's also a great time to hit time out and say, let me take a look at one, my environment. Let me take a look at my habits. Let me take a look at my discipline. And then let me see what I can refine or pivot slightly to create a better outcome in the next 30 days compared to the last 30 days. So, those are some of the things that I quickly think of based on your question. But tell me if you want to unpack that more differently.
No, that was great. That was great. There's so much useful information in there. I couldn't agree more. I want to talk a little bit about some of the people, not specifically, but some of the people that you've interviewed on your show, on your podcast, and you titled your podcast At the Podium. So I'm curious, in your life, what's a moment that you've experienced personally or professionally where you have truly felt like you are at the podium, where your purpose and your commitment, all of those things were perfectly aligned?
Wow. This will go back many years. And it's probably the earliest one where I felt that personally, professionally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, everything was intersecting like at a really healthy place. And I would say that goes all the way back to when my wife and I used to sponsor the Miles for Melanoma race, the 5K in Chicago. And we also chaired the Wings of Hope Gala for the Melanoma Research Foundation. A lot of people in Michigan don't know her story because we've been here less than 10 years, but going back to when Samantha was expecting Atlas 15 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with melanoma skin cancer. And for those that know and understand skin cancer, melanoma is the deadliest form of skin cancer. And so it was very frightening. She was halfway through her term, and all of a sudden she finds out that she has melanoma skin cancer. Candidly, at that time, I had no idea how to even process what that meant, right? I was 30 years old, just grinding my tail off professionally. All of a sudden, we get this diagnosis. I don't know what that really means. I didn't understand the severity of it. But anyway, because of having great providers and great medical professionals around her, they successfully removed it. She has not had complications related to melanoma since then, although she's had her own journey with a number of different types of skin cancers, sadly, which is why she's such an advocate for holistic health and healing and taking care of your body. But anyway, that experience introduced us to the Melanoma Research Foundation as we were searching for answers on how to make sure that Samantha and our soon to be born son Atlas would experience the best care. Because of that, we became very passionate advocates. And so we were one of the founding families that helped to bring the Miles for Melanoma 5K race to Chicago. Very proudly, Mass Mutual stood behind us to help us accomplish that. And a few years later, we chaired and launched the very first Wings of Hope Gala in the city of Chicago as well to benefit families fighting melanoma and the Melanoma Research Foundation. I would say those 4 to 5 years were just a season where I felt like, wow, I've achieved enough professionally that I can influence an organization like Mass Mutual to come alongside us to help bring awareness and education and resources to families fighting this terrible disease. And so we were able to pull together time, talent, treasure, and drive people to this incredible cause over about a half decade in a way that I just would have never thought possible years prior. Our families got involved. Financially, we were able to contribute. Professionally, we were able to activate companies as sponsors and supporters of the cause. And it's just one of the times when I felt like coming out of a very tragic experience and something that my wife and my children, sadly, because some of it is hereditary, they'll have to deal with and manage and maintain for the rest of their lives. Coming out of something that tragic, we were able to do something really meaningful. And so I think that's probably when I felt most like I was standing at a podium consistently, not just sharing something really powerful, but creating influence, activation, and impact.
Just a quick aside to that, and I love that answer as so amazing. Were you able to recognize in those moments that you felt really aligned, or did that come with some time and some reflection?
I would say both, actually. In those moments, in that season or that chapter of our lives, man, I just felt that I was correcting, taking corrective steps towards not having been as prepared for when the diagnosis originally happened. I had carried great regret for not fully understanding, not just physically, but emotionally, what Samantha was going through at that time, and not having been educated myself as to the significance and the potential severity of what an outcome, what a not positive outcome could have been like. I had always just carried that as, man, how am I going to make this better? How can I make this right? So I think when that was happening, I felt as if I had at least taken a few steps towards correcting something I'd wished I'd handled differently. But even over the years, I still hear from people from those years in Chicago, families who have benefited from the great work the MRF does. I served on the national board for a number of years. So every time I hear a story, someone reaches out, or I see one of those physicians, surgeons, dermatologists recognized, it just brings a little bit of, I don't know, just gratitude that I could have been a part of it and hopefully been one of the many spokes in the wheel that drove that change.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. You mentioned the philanthropy. I want to ask you too. MassMutual has been repeatedly recognized for its culture. So I'm curious if you could share maybe one unconventional or even counterintuitive way that you, as steward of the firm, intentionally try to build that culture within the organization.
I don't think it's an unconventional way, but I think it's something that, because we're all so busy, sometimes we don't invest enough time into being intentional with people. But there's a couple things we try to do right every single day, or at least I try to do. Is one is I like my meetings to be 15, 25, or 50 minutes long. And the reason they're not a half hour or a full hour, and the reason why I don't do a lot of back-to-back meetings, I typically always have a tiny buffer, is I like to walk the floor. One of the top people I've ever met in our industry, his name's Michael Book. He's out of New York. Just one of the most talented and wonderful humans I've ever been around. He always calls it managing by walking around. And so taking that time to be intentional, to walk the floor, to say hello, to greet people, to remember names, spouses, children, birthdays, etc. I think it's important. So I try to do that 8, 10, 12 times a day, depending on the cadence of my meetings. But I think it's just building relationship by walking around. And that's really what I've called it when I've shared it with others, or people ask me why I take so many laps during the day. It's like I'm just trying to continue to invest in and establish strong relationships with the people within our firm. Number two, something microscopic, but that people have called my attention to that I do differently. I call everybody a teammate. It's not staff, it's not employee, it's not assistant, it's not this. I strongly dislike the word boss. I'm traumatized. Everybody has little traumas and big traumas, right? Little T's and big T's. If you go to therapy, you learn what that means. I've been in a lot of therapy, and I learned that the reason I have such a strong dislike for the word boss is that there are two people specifically in the history of my life, being an employee to others, that insisted they were the boss, and they felt like very toxic humans to me. And so I've always been like, oh, please don't call me the boss. So I prefer words like steward or team captain, right? And I call the people that I work with teammates. I think that's something simple, but I think what it is, what I'm trying to do is invite people in to feel as if not only can they take ownership, but that everything they do matters, right? Starbucks Experience Chapter 2, everything matters. So it's, hey, I want people to want to take responsibility over their attitude, their energy, their communication style. And I think when we treat people like teammates and we call people our teammates, I think they feel empowered to do. And so that's a second thing we do. I think the third thing, and Billy, you know how I am, I think that gifting and compliments are a must, right? So I'm always like, the phrase in my head is surprise and delight, right? First of all, I don't pay a compliment that I don't mean. So if I say it, that means I mean it. But the world is moving so fast, and people are typically, it's hard to not be in our own miserable self interest. So if we're having a tough moment, we're going through some adversity, it's not a shocker that we're not the friendliest people to be around in that moment. We all struggle with it, right? But I think when things are good, when we can stay positive, when we can say positive things to others, you never know when that compliment that we pay in that moment, which by the way, compliments are free. Last time I checked, I don't get a bill from the IRS saying you paid out 1 million compliments last year, so you owe us $1 million. Compliments are free. You never know when that compliment about someone's shoes, a new hoodie, something you saw that their child did over the weekend or their church was involved in. You never know when that compliment turns the corner for that person mentally and emotionally. And since compliments are free, I insist on them. The second part of that was the gifting that I mentioned a second ago. It's like, I love to surprise and delight. My office, there's always hundreds of books in my office. You also know that I love to buy swag. I love having hoodies. I love having t-shirts. I love having awesome duffel bags. I love to surprise and delight people with things I love. And so for me, it's if I have a great call with somebody and I'm like, man, I just really enjoyed it. And that person says something about a book or an article or something I can get my hands on. Holly will tell you, and Holly, within 15 minutes, I voice noted her a note saying, hey, I need you to send Bill Burke XYZ, right? When your son won that game, I was like, dude, he is the king of East Lansing today. And I wanted to make sure that Blake felt recognized, right? And so that idea of, hey, surprise and delight people, right? Send it when it's not expected and send something that's not expected. I just think that can go a long way for culture. So hopefully some of those were helpful.
I hope the listeners are taking notes because you just included so much valuable information in how to be a leader professionally at the office, which begs the question, as a husband and as a father, how do you balance your personal life with chasing your professional dreams? And what do you hope your kids see or take away from the example that you're setting at home?
That's just a never ending journey that I'm on for like continuous improvement in my relationships at home. I really it really causes me to pause. And I'm not a jealous person, but sometimes I feel a little bit of jealousy when friends of ours are like, oh man, my marriage couldn't be any better. Oh man, my relationship with my daughter and my son couldn't be any better. Like, Billy, when I hear that, I'm like, man, I suck because I'm just continuously thinking, like, how, let me say this, maybe not continuously thinking, but in any given week, Bill, I have wins and losses with Samantha, with Ava, and with Atlas. Now, is I try to work from systems and I try to work from systems that are written because, as you also know, I've said it 1,000 times just in the last year to people. If your system is not written, it's not real. So, couple things in my system. One, I have therapy multiple times a week. Really hard to forget what's important to me if I'm going to therapy every week. Number two, Samantha and I host the Family Matters every Sunday night. Every Sunday night, she, Ava, our junior in high school, and Atlas, our freshman in high school, the four of us sit down. We go over for the calendar for the week, requests that the kids have for activities that week, and anything else that's important to them or to us. In that Family Matters session, coming out of that, Samantha and I also try to always schedule 2 to 3 times that week to have one-on-one time. Sometimes that's a coffee at 7 a.m. Tonight, that's going to be her and I sitting outside at 8:30 p.m. after I get home from therapy. And typically, at least one time a week, it's like a date night out. Typically, it's by ourselves. Every once in a while with another couple. But those systems, those are systems that are in there. Another part of the systems is, and Holly will say this to you and to anyone, any game of my children will not be missed. It will not be scheduled over by anything. I've skipped out on conferences. I've left on a 10 p.m. flight at night to not miss one of Atlas's football games. I've canceled things last minute because I'm just not going to miss a game, even if the game is what's rescheduled. I do not want to miss the things that are most important to my children. Now, I'm using the analogy of sports. Our children, you and I are both very blessed that we both have very competitive children. That includes school, that includes church, right? Every Sunday at Kensington, 11 a.m. service. But again, I would summarize it as, because I'm rambling now, but I would summarize it as one, I'm on this like never ending journey of continuous self improvement in the way I am serving and leading the most important relationships in my life. And that being with my faith, my spouse, my children, my family, and my closest friends, right? Two, the systems I do have, though, they're written. And as you and I both agree, what gets scheduled is typically what gets done. So everything goes into my calendar on the front end of the week. Three, everything on the calendar has rules. So therapy doesn't get written over, date nights don't get written over, family matters don't get written over, anything relating to Ava and Atlas don't get written over, and medical appointments, as many as I can attend with my family as those arise, don't get written over when possible. But so I think if you have good systems and they're written, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to honor them. And I think that's a simple first step towards having a little bit of success in that space.
Well, another amazing answer. And I would encourage you to never be jealous of what your friends say about their relationships. Number one, I would suspect that they're not all as great as they're described to be. And number two, I think on the opposite side of that, what it really makes you so attractive to so many people and such a great leader is your vulnerability, your candor, your transparency with all of the personal stuff, and the fact that you don't have it all figured out because truthfully, none of us do. So I don't want you to ever apologize for that because it's one of the things that makes you so magnetic. So I love that you were open and honest with that answer. Final question, Manny, and thank you again so much for being here. In your business, there's a lot of discussion around the idea of legacy. So when it's all said and done, how does Manny want to be remembered, not just as a business leader, but as a human being?
It's interesting you asked that question, right? I wrote a post a couple of weeks ago that I posted online, and it got mixed reviews, and I actually welcome that. It was about my legacy and my perspective on my legacy. And what I shared in that post was that I really foresee my legacy being what my children become. And one of the people on that post commented and said, what if your children struggled? What if your children make bad decisions? What if your children come up on really hard times? And paraphrasing his point was, and we did everything right as parents. That was a great point. I don't know, but his point doesn't change my perspective that for me, my legacy is what my children become. And so when I think about what do I want my legacy to be, whatever it is, it's going to be a reflection through the life of my children. And I'm okay with that. Now, what I'm hoping some of the characteristics of the story of their lives become is people who loved deeply, people who cared about others, people who had a servant leadership way of operating, people who thought abundantly, lived abundantly, were generous, right? People who recognized the person sitting on the sidewalk as they're shopping on Michigan Avenue in Chicago around Christmas and took a moment to recognize and see that human. Those are some of the things that I hope are reflected through the story of Ava and Atlas's life. And at the end of the day, I just can't think of a more accurate way to say what would my legacy be. I've never really had any other thoughts about it. On the way to death, on the way to death, I want to have impacted a lot of people. And on the way to that sort of the clock running out on us, I hope that when that happens, people look back and say, man, that guy was completely imperfect, but he knew that. He acknowledged that. He worked tirelessly to improve in every aspect of his life that he could. And along the way, he impacted a lot of people for the better, not for the worse.
You've certainly had an impact on me, and I know you're going to have a huge impact on everybody that listens to this. I'm proud to be able to call you a friend, Manny. Thanks so much for being here. Please tell the listeners how they can connect with you, follow your journey, and number three, listen to your show at the podium.
Yeah, thanks for asking. And Bill, first of all, man, thanks for having me on. Love your podcast. You already know that. So I'll give you your flowers once we're off again. But I love the stories that you're sharing. And you've had this gift for many years. So it's nice to see it come to life now. On LinkedIn, it's Manuel Amezcua, Manuel, my last name, Amezcua, Amezcua. On Instagram, it's official Manuel Amezcua. I'm not even sure how we got to that. I think there's only three other Manuel Amezcuas on the planet, but it's official Manuel Amezcua. And you can actually, yeah, you could grab the podcast. We drop it on my Instagram, but you can catch it on YouTube, and it's at the podium with Manuel Amezcua. So thanks again, Bill, for having me on, and send my love to your family.
You do the same. Thanks, Manny.